Well, the work we do here, I think, addresses ultimate values, the sanctity of life, the sense of the sacred, the fact that we're losing that sense in our culture to such an extent that we're fighting against that we believe there are transcendent rights of conscience. I think those things are not only essential tenets of our religious faith, but I think they resonate well with our American fundamentals here, especially those articulated in the Declaration of Independence, that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. Inalienable meaning rights that you cannot trade or take away. You cannot commodify them, buy or sell those rights. And included are rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So I think that it's a joy as well as a necessity that we Christian and Catholic lawyers especially use our legal talents, our professionalism, in service of ultimate values.
All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. You are in the right place at the right time. And wow, it is absolutely amazing how many people are joining us for this Thomas More Society Emergency Nationwide Vaccine Mandate webcast. During our time together, you are going to discover how you can be a part of helping to stop these vaccine mandates that are violating sincerely held religious beliefs. You're going to hear breaking news. You're going to learn what you can do about these coercive government mandates in the workplace and in schools. These mandates are forcing individuals to violate their faith and conscience. And tonight, you will be equipped and empowered to know what you can do about it. I want to be the first to officially welcome you. And right before we logged on, we had 2,225 people registered to participate in this important broadcast event from all across the United States and beyond. And you are here with us live, and I want to thank you. And I want to thank those who are watching the replay of this after the fact. I will be your host for the evening. My name is David B. Wright. We might have met in my previous role as the founder and the former CEO of 40 Days for Life, an international pro-life effort that I was a part of. Or maybe we met as I've traveled to all 50 states and a few dozen countries speaking at various pro-life events. Or it's very likely we met on a previous Thomas More Society webcast or an in-person event. Some of you I may have met when we had an event together in Omaha, Nebraska. Regardless, even if this is the first time we're together, it's a true honor and blessing to be with you. And I am deeply humbled to serve as the host for tonight's very important and very urgent online event. And seeing as we have all of this technology that we're hoping will hold together, we have thousands of people participating in this event, I think it's very important, and particularly due to the seriousness of the matters at hand, that we begin the most important way we can. And that is by an opening prayer and asking God to bless our time together. If you'll please join me. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity to come together in your name. You tell us where two or more gather in your name that you are present in our midst. And tonight, some 2,000 plus people are gathering virtually, but still gathering together in your name. And we invite and we ask your presence to be with us. We thank you so much for the amazing work of the Thomas More Society, protecting life and family and religious liberty, the values and the principles that we hold so dear. We thank you for the attorneys, those we will hear from tonight, as well as the other attorneys who are on the front line of these important cultural battles that Thomas More Society is engaged in. And dear Lord, we know that this last year and a half has been a very, very challenging time for people of faith and conscience. And tonight, we just ask you to please guide and direct our conversation as we talk about those who are being forced against their will, against their religion, against their conscience to be fired or kicked out of school if they do not accept these vaccine mandates, these coercive government mandates. Dear Lord, please bless our time together, bless each and every person who is participating, and help us to know how we can be your hands and your feet in this important effort, and how we can help Thomas More Society and these attorneys advance the causes that we hold dear. And we ask this in the name of your Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. It's in his name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. And again, for those who are just joining us, the numbers are climbing even as we are together. Welcome to the Thomas More Society Emergency Nationwide Vaccine Mandate Webcast. I'm David B. Wright. I'll be serving as your host. This event has been organized by the Thomas More Society. And if you're already familiar with the Thomas More Society, you know what an amazing organization this is. And if you're not yet familiar with the Thomas More Society, by the time we're done tonight, I think you're going to be like me and others. You're going to be a raving fan of this incredible organization. The Thomas More Society is the leading not-for-profit national public interest law firm dedicated to restoring respect in law for life, family, and religious liberty. They're based in Chicago, and with offices and attorneys all across the country, the Thomas More Society defends and fosters support for these vital causes by providing top-notch, high-quality pro bono legal services from local trial courts all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. Currently, the Thomas More Society attorneys are challenging state and federal COVID-19 vaccine mandates. The phones, the emails have been pouring into their offices, and they are working with plaintiffs who have had their sincerely held religious beliefs infringed upon in the workplace and at school. Thomas More Society feels it's vital to challenge government overreach in this case, because that government overreach is what is forcing people to accept a medical treatment that is against their conscience in order to continue their employment or their education. So tonight we're going to be spotlighting some of the important cases on the front lines, the legal battles over this, and show you the egregious discrimination policies of employers over their employees' sincerely held religious beliefs. By the time we are done, I think you're going to be filled with hope and conviction, and you'll recognize that we have an opportunity to stand and fight on the things that we believe in. On a personal note, I've been blessed to work alongside the Thomas More Society for many years. I first met the chief counsel and president of the Thomas More Society, Tom Brecka, when I was starting up 40 Days for Life, and he graciously offered to be all of our pro bono legal counsel for the first decade of that organization through the Thomas More Society attorneys, and they were protecting free speech and the right to life and free assembly. And then I watched how many other organizations and leaders and causes that they were advancing. What I have come to believe, and this is my very biased opinion, but something had to bias me, I believe that the Thomas More Society is the most proactive, impactful, pro-life, pro-family, and religious liberty public interest law firm in the United States of America, with top-notch lawyers all across the 50 states, and they are going on the offense to fight and win key cultural battles. So tonight you're going to hear from some of those crucial cultural battle front lines, and by the time you're done, you're going to know what you can do to make a freedom-protecting and world-changing impact. You're going to hear breaking news about some of the latest vaccine mandates. You're going to find out how to stand up and defend your sincerely held religious beliefs from coercive government directives and sanctions. Tonight we'll have deep dive discussions about these vaccine mandate cases that are proliferating all across the United States right now. You're going to find out why recent legal rulings could lead to significant outcomes that will affect your religious rights and mine, both now and in the future. And bottom line, you're going to discover what you can do to protect religious freedoms for you, for your loved ones, and for the rest of freedom-loving Americans from these draconian measures. Tonight, you're going to be hearing from an all-star lineup. I can't wait for you to hear them. I see them all in our little green room in the background of the technology platform here. These Thomas More Society lawyers are just heroic figures fighting on the front lines for the causes that you and I believe in. We'll be hearing from, in a few minutes, Andy Bath, the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Thomas More Society. We will also hear from Special Counsel Paul Jonah. You'll hear from Vice President and Senior Counsel Peter Breen. You'll hear from Senior Counsel Steve Crampton and Special Counsel Chris Ferreira. And though he won't be joining us, you saw a brief video at the introduction from the founder and the Chief Counsel of Thomas More Society. And all of these men are heroes of mine. And I think if you are not already familiar with them, they'll be heroes of yours by the time we're done. I'm sure glad we've got these heroes in our corner fighting for our most fundamental rights. Now, we had so many questions submitted as you were registering for the event, lots and lots of questions. So we divvied them up. Some of those will be covered directly by our rock star lineup of attorneys, but other of those, as time permits, we're going to be bringing in throughout the conversation. So thank you for those questions, and thank you so much for your willingness to be a part of this event. And so with that, I'm going to bring up into the stream so he can join us for the conversation, Andy Bath, Executive Vice President and General Counsel of the Thomas More Society. Andy, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great, David. Thank you very much for the intro. Great to be here. Great to see so many people with us tonight.
Isn't this amazing?
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Yeah, and Karen, who I know is watching and listening to us, you have to keep texting us to let us know what the tallies are as people continue to join us. This, Andy, I think you first put out the message about this within the last 36 to 40 hours, and we have had thousands of people sign up. It's clearly struck a nerve with folks.
It's an amazing response. We're very gratified, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, Andy, let's dive in. Can you share how the Thomas More Society has risen to the call to defend particularly the religious consciences of so many Americans who have a deep conviction about the evils of abortion, and also how this sincerely held belief prevents many of them from taking a vaccine that they view as complicit in abortion in any way, shape, or fashion?
Yeah, David, I'll be happy to. And I hope this doesn't surprise anybody. So many of you who are familiar with the Thomas More Society might know all the work we do defending pro-lifers, supporting much of the pro-life movement in this country. That work began with the monumental victory that Tom Brecka won at the Supreme Court in Now versus Scheidler, which is the case that brought about our founding. But actually, we're not solely a pro-life organization. We have a tripartite mission. We defend not only life, but also family and religious liberty. And of course, we're lucky to live in a free country that has a constitution and many other laws that protect our right to freely exercise our religion and live out our religious beliefs. But we know from hard experience that those rights have to be defended or they'll be lost. Now, the Thomas More Society just came off a series of battles to keep churches open in the face of clearly unconstitutional edicts from on high that closed or severely restricted church attendance while permitting liquor stores, marijuana dispensaries, and even abortion clinics to remain open. So we ended up suing cities, counties, and states all across this country, including some of the big ones like California, Illinois, New Jersey, and New York. Now, in many of those cases, we suffered some early setbacks, but our supporters stuck with us and lifted us up so we could hang in there and then file the emergency appeals it took in courts all across this country until we ultimately got justice from the United States Supreme Court. As a result of our efforts, we are proud to say that churches in America are open again. And now, David, we've had to turn our attention to the latest COVID-driven threat to religious liberty. Now we're defending the rights of religious believers who don't want to be forced to use a product that is only available to them because of its dependence on the great evil of abortion. Now, many people have religious objections to using vaccines that were either developed, produced, or tested using these cell lines that were derived from babies who are the victims of elective abortions. And I've been taking calls from good people all across the country who've been told they have to get the vaccine or lose their job. And the deadlines they're faced with are often very short, and these people are emotional. This really puts them in a tough position, and it really tests their faith. Many of the people, by the time they call me, they've already been suspended or fired. But there's some really inspirational stories. There was the pilot who flew for one of the major airlines who retired early rather than take the vaccine. This guy walked away from a $400,000 per year salary rather than compromise his beliefs. And then there's people on the other end of the spectrum who live paycheck to paycheck. Some of them have family care responsibilities that would make it very difficult for them to be out of work, even for a very short time. And, David, I had a woman crying on the phone saying she just couldn't. She didn't want to lose her job. But she said, I fear God and I fear his judgment. And, so it really irks me when I read letters from haughty employers or see statements from haughty government officials, including some judges, by the way, who question the sincerity of the religious beliefs of these kind of people who are willing to sacrifice so much rather than violate their religious beliefs. Well, you can bet that the Thomas More Society is going to be there for those good people. So I want to thank all of our supporters because they make it possible for us to come through for those good, heroic people who are in a time of crisis. That's when they turn to us. And we're representing some of them in court, but we want to help everybody who's in this situation. So we put up some really good resources on our website to explain the threat, to tell you about the options the law gives you. We've had a bunch of our really smart lawyers spend a lot of time on this. Please go to our website. It's www.thomasmoresociety.org, and More has one O. And when you go to the homepage, you'll be faced with a big red button that says Vaccine Mandate Legal Help, and you will find a lot of resources there. Now tonight, we've got an all-star cast to tell you about the issues and discuss our cases. And you're going to hear stories from the front lines in the struggle between freedom and tyranny here on Earth. But there's one thing we all have to keep in mind, and that is that even our biggest courtroom battles are really just minor skirmishes in what is really a much larger spiritual battle. So please pray for us. Pray for our work, pray for our clients, and especially pray for all of these people who are forced to choose between losing their job or violating their sincerely held religious beliefs. Now, with that last thought, I'll turn it back to you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, Andy, thank you so much. And I also want to make everybody aware, Andy was referencing the Vaccine Mandate Legal Help, and we've actually put that on the webcast page as well, so you don't have to leave your browser window. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of this page where the video is playing, you'll see that button that says Vaccine Mandate Legal Help, and if you click it, it will open a new tab in your browser, and you can begin to get that help. And I want to thank Thomas More Society and Andy for you and your leadership in helping to make that possible. And Andy, I know we're going to hear from you a little bit at the very end, and I just want to say for now, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to having you back in just a few moments.
Glad to be part of this, David. Thank you.
Now it is time for us to hear from Thomas More Society Special Counsel Paul Jonah. Paul, how are you doing this evening?
Great. Thank you, David. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, doing great. And thank you so much for being a part of this broadcast. Paul, can you tell us about the latest case, which was just filed this week against the San Diego Unified School District regarding their COVID-19 vaccine mandate for students?
Sure. So the San Diego Unified School District is one of the first in the state, and probably one of the first in the country, to mandate the COVID-19 vaccine on high school children 16 and up, and eventually children 5 through 12 as well, and then 13 through 15. So they have a whole scheme that they're trying to implement where they're going to get all the kids fully vaccinated. And what they're doing, though, is they are not offering children religious exemptions. They're only offering medical exemptions, and they're carving out some students in certain categories that were not bound by this mandate. So what we're seeing is they're starting to make exceptions for some, but they're just ignoring religious objections to this vaccine, which is the same mistake that the state made when they imposed the shutdown on churches during the pandemic. So if the viewers recall, in California, like in many other states, what we saw was governors keeping retail open and closing down churches, basically recognizing secular interests over religious interests. And the Supreme Court said that was not right. That was unconstitutional. And in our case, South Bay versus Newsom struck down the indoor worship ban in California. And basically the principle was that if you're gonna leave retail open, you're gonna have to also leave churches open and treat them at least the same, if not better. But what we have here in San Diego is that they're basically saying they're completely ignoring religious objections to this vaccine, which is unconstitutional under a long line of Supreme Court precedent. including the most recent church cases, but other cases beyond those. So our client is a 16-year-old high school student in San Diego, a devout Christian, and her and her two parents are plaintiffs in this lawsuit. She plays two sports at the high school. She's proceeding anonymously in the case because of fear of retaliation and harassment. We've already received reports, by the way, that when teachers found out about this lawsuit, they read about it in class, and the students were joking about, let's find out who this girl is and jump her. So unfortunately, it seems as though our concerns about her safety were actually very legitimate, and we're glad we proceeded anonymously. But what I can tell you about her is that she's a devout Christian. She's very pro-life. She has a strong objection to participating in any way in anything that is connected to abortion. And she knows that these vaccines, all of them, are either tested or derived through the use of aborted fetal cells. And that is taking that vaccine would violate her sincere religious beliefs. In addition, she's already recovered from COVID. She didn't even know she had it. She sees no medical reason whatsoever to take the vaccine. And we have a preeminent expert in this case, Dr. Scott French, a medical doctor who's analyzed all the literature, all the scientific studies, and concludes that there's just no basis for a mandatory vaccine on high school kids, given the risk-benefit ratio here. And we actually just heard a report recently, which I think everyone should know about, where an FDA panelist, a Harvard doctor, Dr. Eric Rubin, was quoted saying that, it's really going to be a question. He says that whether to impose this vaccine on high school kids is a close call. And he says it's going to be a question of what the prevailing conditions are, but we're never going to learn about how safe this vaccine is unless we start giving it. That is a quote from a FDA panelist who's basically saying they want to treat our children, high school children, as lab rats and experiment on them with this vaccine. So her objections in this case is focused, like I said, on religious objections to the vaccine, but we also have an expert who explains that there's just no rational scientific justification for a mandate like this. And the state of California, by the way, when they announced that they would be also imposing a statewide mandate on high school children, did say that they would offer religious exemptions for students. So San Diego Unified is going a step further and not offering that. We think it's clearly unconstitutional. We filed a case in the Southern District of California in federal court. We're going to ask for relief before November 29th, which is the deadline for our client to get the first shot. And we think we have a really good case. We're going to see it all the way through the courts of appeal, the Supreme Court if we need to. And that's a basic summary of that case for now.
And Paul, I'm going to be next Tuesday, I'll be in San Diego, and it just brought to mind just that much more how much we need to all, even if we don't live in California, pray for those who are being subjected to these kinds of mandates, and particularly for your client and for justice to prevail in this case. And if I could, I have a few questions that came in from some of our webcast attendees. Karen in California asks, if a California Catholic diocese upholds the California state school vaccine mandate for children 5 and up, what are the legal rights that parents have to be able to push back on this while still keeping their children enrolled in a private Catholic school?
Yeah, we get that question a lot. Unfortunately, people are not that, don't have a lot of confidence that our Catholic bishops are going to push back because we didn't see a lot of that, unfortunately, with the church closures either from the bishops. But what I can say is that according to Governor Newsom, at least for the initial round of these mandates, he is going to allow for religious exemptions. Now, I've also heard questions posed like, what if the bishop doesn't allow them? But what the governor does, which I guess is also possible. Well, we have to hope and pray that our bishops, do the right thing. What I can say is that if the governor forces them to impose the mandate without religious exemptions, there is a very strong line of recent Ninth Circuit law that I think bishops could use to justify pushing back so that, and they could call the Thomas More Society, and we'd be happy to help any Catholic bishop. But so I think what's very important, though, is that we win this case, because our case, if we prevail, will establish that there is a First Amendment right for students to reject this vaccine on religious grounds. So I think ultimately that's the key in California, at least right now.
Well, we've obviously struck a nerve. Andrew, a viewer from Los Angeles, is asking, how do I avoid COVID vaccine? Try saying that 3 times fast. COVID vaccine mandates as well as mandatory testing. And he's asking, is it finally time? Is it best for me to move out of state?
A lot of people are asking us that too, and a lot of good friends I know have moved out of state. I would say it's definitely worth staying here and fighting it out. We know that we can win these battles. I won't get into the whole story with Pastor John MacArthur, but in a nutshell, that is an unbelievable story and one of the most amazing religious liberty wins. And it just happened not that long ago. Basically, he decided that these mandates were unconstitutional. He intentionally violated them. He was threatened with jail. He was threatened with fines. They revoked his parking lot lease. He fought back. He sued them. He was almost held in contempt for violating a judge's order. But in the end, he emerged victorious. He prevailed against the County of Los Angeles, and they paid his attorney's fees. And so I just, obviously we can't guarantee that result in every case, but what I can say is that we are winning cases in California. And so I think the key in Los Angeles would be that we need to, if we win this case here in San Diego, I think, like I said, it should establish strong precedent statewide. But these battles are winnable. And but for many people, moving does make a lot of sense given their situation. So that's the best I can answer.
Well, no, I appreciate that, Paul, and I think it really is compelling for all of us to recognize that we're in a different cultural moment than we have been, at least in our lifetimes, and it's a moment that's going to call for all of us to stand up for what we believe in, and in many cases to fight right where we are, to grow where we're planted. One final question that came in from another webcast attendee. Stephen is asking, how can one defend her or his faith and conscience in light of some clergy who appear to approve of vaccinations, and then I would add also some who approve of vaccine mandates?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's not exactly a legal question, but what I will say is that it's important to remember that the church, at least the Catholic Church, has never taught that getting a vaccine is a moral duty to protect your neighbor. Pope Francis has said some things that is praiseworthy, but the church has actually never taught that it's a duty. So the issue is whether getting the vaccine is immoral or not, and primarily due to the connection to aborted children. And the Catholic Church teaches that a properly formed conscience can come to different conclusions on this. And so that's the actual teaching. And I think that understanding that and maybe communicating that to your pastor it would be important. But I know that there is a lot of confusion in the church on this. So there are some bishops who have taken stronger stands, and so you gotta do your research. But that's my answer.
Amen. Well, I thank you very much, Paul, for your answers to these questions. I thank you for this case you're fighting right now in San Diego and all the great work you are doing on behalf of the Thomas More Society and on behalf of the values and virtues that we all hold dear. So thank you very much, Paul.
It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you, David.
Okay, well, before we move on to our next legal expert, I do want to make an announcement and extend an invitation. As we're already hearing, and you're going to hear more of from the other attorneys throughout this webcast, the Thomas More Society is taking a courageous stand on behalf of our religious liberty, as well as the sanctity of human life and the dignity of marriage and family. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize the need to stand with them in these vital cultural shaping efforts. And right now, I think you would agree, the stakes could not possibly be higher. And so the opportunity tonight is to support the work of the Thomas More Society. And I'll just mention this a few times throughout our broadcast tonight. Perhaps you feel led to make a one-time gift to support this work or a monthly pledge. But I also said we'd have an announcement. So this is where it gets really fun. Up until shortly before we got on this webcast, and we are here live right now. It's Thursday, October the 28th. It's 8:32 p.m. Eastern time. I'm with you here if you are here with us on the live broadcast. Up until right before we got on the webcast, we had a big announcement. And the announcement, you'll actually see it on this page, so it wasn't going to be so much of a surprise, was that a group of supporters had rallied together to assemble a $200,000 matching challenge, specifically to double any one-time gift you make in response to this webcast, or the annualized amount of any monthly pledge up to $200,000. Now, that would have been really good news, right? If we had been able to share that with you. But doggone if somebody didn't mess that up. So you see on the page, we didn't even get a chance to update it. It still says $200,000 matching challenge. But the huge news is, right as we were getting ready to log on, another donor reached out to Thomas More Society and said, I'm in, and pledged an additional $50,000 to the matching challenge. That means that right now, tonight, there is a $250,000, $250,000 matching challenge so that every one-time gift you make, if you make a $1,000 gift, that'll instantly be doubled to $2,000. A $10,000 gift will become $20,000, but also the annualized amount of your monthly pledge. So if you make a $500 monthly pledge, that's 500 times 12 is 6,000. That would become $12,000 because of this matching challenge. No amount is too large, no amount is too small, whatever God puts on your heart, but it will only be matched up to $250,000. If you want to give $251,000, all but $1,000 of that will be matched by these generous donors. So these donors invested and put this pledge forward because they wanted to invite you and me to match them in their generosity that is going towards not only vaccine mandates and pushing back against those, but all the other crucial cases, over 160 cases that Thomas More Society is battling right now all across America. Up to $250,000, our gifts will be doubled tonight throughout this webcast, and there's a deadline. This goes from now through Monday, November the 15th. So a little over 2 weeks from now is the deadline for that matching challenge. So if you feel led to invest tonight, go right ahead and do that. If you need to talk to your spouse, if you need to pray about it, you'll get some emails and you can follow up and make your donation. So prayerfully consider and then make your most generous gift. And the way I look at it is, if you and I care about religious liberty, if we care about the sanctity of life, if we care about marriage and family, there is, in my opinion, no better investment than investing in the work of Thomas More Society. We will be able to fight back against these coercive government vaccine mandates and be able to accomplish so much more, because this work multiplies its impact through all of these different precedents that are being set as they fight and win cases nationwide. So down below the video, if you feel led to make an investment now, there are 2 buttons. And if you click those buttons, it will open new tabs in your browser, so you'll still be able to hear our next guest. We're going to have Peter Breen on here in just a minute so he can get himself ready. He'll be on screen in just a minute. But the one button down below the video, it says donate once. If you click that, it will open a new tab in your browser. And I did this right before we logged in. I went ahead and made my gift. I'm not asking you to do something I'm not willing to do. I pulled that up. I clicked the button. It opened up the new tab. I filled in my information. It took me less than 30 seconds to make my gift to the Thomas More Society with the confidence that will be doubled up to that $250,000. If you feel led to do that, please do. And also, if you feel led to make a pledge of ongoing monthly support, remember that will be multiplied by 12 to be annualized, and that number will be doubled. If you choose to do that, down below the video, click the button that says Give Monthly. There's one little caveat when it opens that page, because I did this as well. When you open up the page, that new tab on the Give Monthly button, when you see the different dollar amounts or you put in your own dollar amount, just make sure to check the little box that says make this a monthly recurring donation. And that's how it will be set up, as a monthly donation, be annualized, and then that will be doubled. So you can either click the donate once, the Give Monthly button, or feel free to do both of those. One last thing, if for any reason you're having any trouble with those buttons, you can always just go to thomasmoresociety.org and click the donate button up at the top. And that's Thomas More, M-O-R-E, 10, thomasmoresociety.org. Click donate between now and Monday, November the 15th, and your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $250,000. And that has given me time. And now I'm going to bring on screen Peter Breen. Peter, how are you doing? First of all, I know we had some technical issues. Peter is Vice President and Senior Counsel. How are you doing this evening?
Man, I am doing great. I mean, I can't believe an extra $50,000. I mean, that is wonderfully generous. So we're up to 250. I mean, that's incredible.
It's awesome.
That's great news, man. No, it's, I didn't even know about that. We've been working so hard. We've got emergency filings and things going on like crazy. I just hadn't even, I hadn't gotten the email about that. I don't even know if it got circulated yet. That's wonderful.
Well, for those who are joining us, just so you know, Peter jumped on literally seconds before we were ready to go live, and we were scrambling to get the sound, the video, and my audio is piping through a phone because we're having troubles. He had a child running in the background, and he's not kidding when he says they are scrambling on so many important fronts right now. But Peter, help us to know, I know you're going to brief us on the egregious treatment that a client experienced from her employer when she filed her religious accommodation request. Can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. And so what we've been working on tonight actually is the University of Colorado imposed a vaccine mandate with a religious exemption policy that only allowed certain religions to apply. So they said, well, if you're a Christian Scientist, we'll let you through. But the Catholics, nope. We have another client who's a Buddhist. And they were like, nope, you're not good enough. And so we, of the cases we've been able to bring, we brought that case. And so we are in court in the district court in Colorado. But here's the thing. We filed this case a few weeks ago. The big media firestorm there in Denver and across the state. We have had nearly 20 people come to us, 20 more employees who have been mistreated by the University of Colorado. And so we are actually in the process tonight of getting a new complaint on file to bring all of their cases before the court. We're looking for emergency relief. I mean, we've got everybody, horrible situations, pregnant moms who need their health insurance. They're being threatened with firing. You've got students that are in their final year of dental school or medical school, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And they were actually initially told, you're going to be fine with your exemption. The university pulled the rug out from under them, and they're sitting here, stuck. Their classes are proceeding, and they've been pulled out of their classes altogether. And so we're absolutely, getting after it, trying to get relief for these folks. But I want to speak more generally, David. Here's the thing. When this crisis first hit, the business of these mandates coming down across the country, we were inundated, and every public interest firm was inundated with this. Personal friends that I hadn't talked to in years texting me going, hey, what do I do about this? Folks are getting through my wife. I mean, and it's like that for all of our attorneys. We said, look, we just can't handle the volume coming in. So we really have a 3-part strategy. Number one is to try to triage. Try to keep as many people in their jobs as possible. That's why we put up our website at thomasmoresociety.org. There's a page that is COVID vaccine, and we've got it linked now. You've got to send anybody that even has a hint of a vaccine mandate coming at their employer or their school. Get them there, get them working on getting their religious exemption request in. And really almost all the questions are answered there. That's our best advice. And we've been able, using that website and using a little bit of back and forth on email as we've needed to, we've been able to get most folks relief. So it's really, though, it's the bad actors. Like we've had this issue at the University of Colorado. And what's funny is actually it's only one campus of the university. If you're on one of the other campuses at Boulder or Denver, you're fine. They give you a religious exemption, like nothing. It's just if you're at the medical school campus, they've been really sticking it to you. So this is part of the problem we're dealing with. That was number one, is the triage. Number two, we are taking on the biggest cases that we can. So suing the state of New York, suing these various large entities, finding the most egregious issues. One of the keys here, though, too, unfortunately, the way the employment law works, you really don't have a lot you can do against a private employer unless you're actually fired. And so those cases drag on and all of that. So we're really trying to keep people in their jobs as much as humanly possible, because what we're going to have to do down the road, there are, unfortunately, a number of folks, personal friends of mine and many others who've reached out to us who have been fired. And so we're going to have to file suit down the line in the year to come to try to get relief for them. But this has been a horrible situation for the country. I'm glad to see, at least when I read public opinion polling, that it seems like the people of the country are not for it. And you're getting some pushback now, politically and otherwise. But we are doing everything we can to try to keep everybody in their jobs as best we can. And then again, take after the big bad actors right now. And then, we're going to have a big effort across the country. Our lawyers, we're going to have to get a big team together to be able to file suits against all of the other employers that continue to do bad things. But that's the global plan, David. So there's still a lot of work to be done in the days, weeks, and months to come.
So Peter, as you said, everybody's been inundated and is triaging the situation. Can I bring a few of the questions that came in just from a few of our webcast participants, that if you could address these? Hermione asks, what could someone do if they submitted a religious accommodation and it was rejected, subsequently leading the company saying that the employee had to quit for not taking the vaccine before the deadline, what would you say to them?
Well, so here's the thing. When you submit that religious accommodation request, it's supposed to be an interactive process. There's supposed to be some back and forth. So if a company rejects you, I want to answer the question, but I want to start though. If they reject you on the first run, push back. I mean, this is your livelihood we're talking about. And I got to tell you, I talked to so many people, they're shell shocked because look, after what we've been through, since the great financial crisis and, there was a dot-com bubble before that, folks are used to being downsized. You're used to losing your job for that reason. You're also used to losing your job if you're not very good at it. But if your company is doing fine, there's demand for the product and you're doing a great job, to be told by your employer, oh, by the way, yeah, you're not following this mandate we just imposed due to your religious beliefs, we're firing you anyway. It really is shell shocking people. So push back respectfully. Use our website. You can reach out to us as well. We're trying to give as much individualized attention as we can for folks that get rejected. And that's really, that's the place where we maybe can help. We had an instance today. I was talking to one of our great attorneys, Michael McHale. He helped somebody who was with a big employer, a very large national company whose name you'd recognize. And that employer was trying to say, well, did you take Tylenol and ibuprofen and what have you? And of course, it was a red herring. So using the language we provided to him, he was able to push back on this major multinational corporation, and they gave him the exemption. So don't give up, don't give in as this process is going on. Now, here's the thing: if the employer actually fires you, that is, if it's a private employer, we're going to have to deal with that case in a longer term situation. In most cases, the norm under employment law is for folks that are wrongfully fired, they bring a lawsuit. There's a damages action for the most part. And so normally, you get money and we go from there. But that is, I know that's not ideal, but that's where a lot of folks are right now. But again, that's why we want to desperately keep people in their jobs. And is it legal? No, but I have cases. I had a case of a dear friend of mine, worked remotely, was working remotely for his company, and he'd already had COVID, so he's COVID recovered, younger guy, and they just fired him flat out. They didn't care. They didn't engage in the interactive process. The problem is once that's happened, what we've got to do is get all the facts together. He's got to do the typical things that happen when you lose a job, keep a job log and file for unemployment, do that sort of thing. And then we're going to have to fight that in the months and years to come. It's not satisfying always, but that's the problem with most private employers. Government, we can sometimes get into court and be able to come after them if they're directly violating the First Amendment. But that is still, it's a tough road to hoe.
Well, Peter, you've answered several of the other questions that I had queued up here from some of our viewers, Gary and Ann, and some of the other ones that have come in. And I think you've given a thorough explanation. But I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, say thank you. I know we've been friends. We've worked alongside each other for many, many, many years. And I've seen you fighting the good fight, not only in Illinois, but all across the country. And just thank you for your leadership. And thank you for everything that you and Thomas More Society are doing, not only on this front, but all the other important cultural fronts as well. I really appreciate you.
Sure. And David, I would just say to folks watching tonight, if you or a loved one have not personally been impacted by this, please do keep those folks in your prayers. These folks that are being just unexpectedly fired. I got terrible stories, single moms, pregnant women. We've got families where they're barely making ends meet. Please pray for them and keep them, just keep them in your thoughts and prayers as you go forward. I know that folks are praying for us as the attorneys because we can feel it. But please, give a little love to those folks too, because this is unprecedented. None of us have seen this in our lifetimes. And so we are all fighting through this together. And, as one big family, one big community of faith, no matter what our particular faith tradition. But I know we're going to get through it, but boy, it's a tough slog right now.
It is. Thank you very much, Peter Breen. And I just want to say, I just got a note that we are now over 2,400 people participating in this webcast. The numbers just keep on growing. And imagine, like Peter was just saying, if we got all of us to pray for God's will to be done and for victory on these cases where those religious views are being persecuted in the workplace and in schools. So in addition to your prayers, which are the most important thing that any of us can ask, I also would encourage you to consider, if you haven't already, making a gift to the Thomas More Society. I think it's one of the best charitable investments. You will get more ROI in terms of advancing the causes that we believe in. And as was mentioned a few minutes ago, right now, tonight, we have a $250,000 matching challenge for all your one-time gifts and annualized amount of your monthly pledges from now through Monday, November the 15th. So you can click the Donate Once, the Give Monthly button if you haven't already. And if you care about religious liberty, life, and family, which I know you do, or you wouldn't be here with 2,399 other people, then if you care about those things, then I would say please make your most generous gift to the Thomas More Society. And that brings me to our next attorney. Let me pull up his shot here. Steve, let's see, Steve Crampton, we got you on. Senior Counsel Steve Crampton, how are you doing this evening, Steve?
Doing great, David. Really great to hear these other guys so far. Great job.
Amen. Doesn't it make you proud to know the guys that you get to work alongside and that you're all out there on the front lines and you get to cheer each other on and lift each other up and know how many people, these 2,400 on this event, are here locking arms with you on these important fights? That's got to make you feel good.
Truly amazing. Really, really humbling too.
Yeah, well, Steve, I know what we're going to have you talk to us about is the clients at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico and their experience requesting a religious accommodation and then how that was met with, once again, egregious discriminatory behavior by their employer.
Yes,
so can you brief us on that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Thank you very much, David. To begin with, the clients that we are dealing with, there are 8 of them. And right now they are on what has been termed indefinite leave without pay. In other words, they're just sort of left out in limbo, no guarantee that they will get their jobs back, no income. Los Alamos has cut them off from all medical benefits. They've been denied, of course, promotional opportunities. They usually would be in line for a bonus, some of them for merit raises and so forth. All of that gone, lost their sick leave, and tremendous amounts in pension and retirement benefits. In some cases, we're talking millions of dollars that they have put up, basically bet the farm, so to speak, here in this case. And what I want to do is just take a minute and step back. As lawyers, we often get sort of bound up in the legal analysis of it, the problem-solving end of things, and forget the human. Andy brought us back home as we began this broadcast and talked about the humanity involved here, David. I want to talk just a little bit about who we're dealing with in our clients in New Mexico. We have some engineers, we have financial analysts, we have an accountant. We have one that's worked in explosive engineering. He's been with the company for 22 years, looking to retire there. We have an environmental compliance expert who specializes in a triumvirate, if you will, of environmental, nuclear, and waste compliance. When they put her out to pasture here, it takes 3 employees to replace her. 3. We have a research tech who works in the high explosive and science technology group. Research and development engineer. 2 of the clients are married. They have 4 children. Their 2 youngest are still at home. And they're sitting here watching their mom and dad going through this loss of their jobs. They're looking at losing their homes. The kids are asking questions and worried about going to school, even saying, I don't understand, Mom and Dad. How is it that you all have been so obedient and prayerful about this decision and trying to obey God, and now you face the loss of your job? We face losing our home and the place that we've known since we were born, may have to leave everything here because you've been obedient to the Lord. It's just extraordinary. Another client lives on a farm. They've already begun selling off livestock to try to make ends meet and pay even their medical insurance, life insurance bills. One client has been repeatedly harassed by her team leader on site, to the extent badgered over this decision not to take the vaccine. At one point, this fellow brought her to tears in front of many of her colleagues right in the middle of the workplace, trying to shame her into taking this vaccine, which she and all of our other clients have prayed seriously over, and as a matter of conscience, of religious conviction, cannot bring themselves to take this vaccine. There's another client who was in college, over 1,000 miles away from Los Alamos. When he got the call to come to this job, he gave up. He was halfway through a master's program, gave it all up, traveled across the country to a place he'd never been before to pitch in on this job, which, as some of you may know, Los Alamos is a key component of our national defense. They work with the intelligence, they work with counterintelligence, they oversee nuclear stockpiles and so forth. This is not just a job, it's a calling. This guy gave everything up to come to this job. When they announced the vaccine mandate, he took off for a weekend into a national park and went off, fasted and prayed and sought the Lord, reading through the scriptures, and finally came to the decision, which the other clients reached as well after much prayer: I simply cannot take this vaccine. So he's now given all of that up, perhaps his entire career, in order to take a stand against this vaccine mandate. One other employee, let me mention, won many awards for his dedication, going above and beyond the call of duty in doing his job, performing with excellence in all respects. He, like several of the other clients, has been working from home for like a year and a half. And yet the lab, in its considered decision, has granted the religious accommodations to our clients and almost 150 others. But what that accommodation amounts to is taking away their pay, putting them on this indefinite leave without pay, and telling them that after 30 days, we probably won't have a job for you. So it's basically become accommodation by termination. Well, as you would imagine, the law doesn't respect or recognize accommodation by termination. And yet that's what they have offered here. So as we sit right now tonight, we are in court tomorrow morning in New Mexico, in the federal district court, to argue our motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. So many lives, David, really hang in the balance here. We have a great team. We are ready to go. And even though we think the law is on our side and the facts are on our side, you know, it's never a sure thing in these cases. And so we would really appreciate your prayers and the prayers of those listening tonight. What we will do at the end of the day is, as some of the other attorneys have already said, we'll take this immediately right up on appeal if we lose tomorrow or when we get a decision. We'll fight this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So while we're only representing 8 clients in this particular case, we're asking for relief for 150 others. And really, as Peter alluded to, we're looking to set precedent that will maybe be of great use nationwide here. One other thing, Peter's talking about the big picture. I want to mention the big picture too. This is a day when I think we face the greatest threat to our freedoms that maybe we have ever faced as a nation. And the saying in the motor vehicle world is speed kills. Well, right now, the employers like Los Alamos National Lab and many others are rushing to implement these vaccine mandates, arbitrary deadlines, setting aside and disregarding with arrogance and just a haughtiness the law that has been longstanding to protect folks, especially with religious exemptions. We're talking the First Amendment, after all, when it's a government entity anyway. And yet there's just this brazen disregard that is forcing us and frankly running us over with the fundamental rights of our clients. So this is a time like no other. And I'm just grateful to be a part of a team that's fighting for the rights here.
Amen. Steve, this is a time like no other. I love those words, and they really are stirring for all of us. And if nobody else is getting motivated throughout this time, then we're not doing something right. Because I'm sitting here, I'm jotting notes to myself. I have an important question. You mentioned that you'll be in court tomorrow on this case in New Mexico. What time will that be so that we can all unite in prayer around that?
It's 9 o'clock Mountain, 10 o'clock Central, 11 Eastern. And for those of you over there in the left coast, I guess it's 8 o'clock in the morning.
There you go. Okay, so I'm going to ask every person who's watching right now, if you can, I just have my little pink Post-it notes, whatever you've got, and I'm going to stick it on my computer screen. Make yourself a note that 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, or if you're in Hawaii or Alaska or you're international, whatever that time coordinates to, please pray. Pray for the attorneys. Pray for these very real people. We've heard their stories. These are people that are being harmed terribly by this egregious discriminatory behavior by their employer. And we need to pray for them. And we need to pray that God's will is accomplished through this case and all of these other important fights. And Steve, from the bottom of my heart, count on my prayers, but also thank you so much for what you and all the other attorneys are doing. And I just appreciate you more than I can express in words.
God bless you. Thank you.
All right. God bless you too. All right. So with that, I'm going to bring on the last of the attorneys on our all-star lineup for tonight. Let me see if I can pull up his camera. Chris Ferreira, he is a special counsel with Thomas More Society. How are you this evening?
I'm fine, David. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so you get to back cleanup. This is awesome, right? All these other amazing attorneys talking about these fights that they're in and how they're pressing forward, asking the 2,400 plus people who are here to pray and to support these efforts. And now it's your turn to fill us in on the New York case with 17 healthcare workers battling against the governor. So can you give us a quick history of that case, a little bit more about these clients who you are representing, Thomas More Society is representing?
Well, first, a little context. You hear about waves of COVID-19. We're on the 5th or 6th wave now, but there have been waves of attack against religious liberty in the name of limiting the spread of COVID-19. The wave of attack in which I first got involved was a wave of attack by governments in the name of limiting the spread of the virus on indoor religious worship. We were told, never on the basis of any data, that indoor worship spaces were somehow more dangerous than secular or commercial indoor spaces. And so religious worship indoors had to be subjected to peculiarly draconian restraints. Ultimately, the Supreme Court rejected that argument, and the Second Circuit, which covers New York State, rejected that argument in the case of Agadoth Israel versus Cuomo. The Second Circuit noted simply that the state had never provided any data to show why religious exercise should be treated more harshly than secular activities, which are comparable, in other words, indoors. And because of the lack of data, the circuit said, henceforth, based upon the Supreme Court precedent and the Tandon decision, the state has to make its case to demonstrate that when any secular activity is more favorably treated than religious activity, there is a compelling justification for it. And the means of approach to religion are narrowly tailored. Well, now we have a new wave of attack in the name of stopping the spread of COVID-19. That's the vaccination wave. Now we're being told that everyone who works in the healthcare industry in New York must be vaccinated. Governor Hochul has actually gone on record as saying this is necessary, believe it or not, because the vaccines are divinely inspired. Anyone who objects to the vaccines is not doing what God wants. And you know who they are, she said, regarding these holdouts in the medical profession. Well, our case involves 17 plaintiffs, doctors, nurses, a medical technician, 2 students who are doing their medical residency, and a physician's liaison. The United States District Court in the Northern District granted us a preliminary injunction against enforcement of the vaccine mandate, under which these people were being threatened with termination for refusing to be vaccinated with substances they believe are immorally connected to infanticide in the form of abortion. The judge recognized that we had prevailed on 2 issues. The first issue is the Title VII issue. Under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the employer and the employee are required to engage in what is called an interactive process for a religious accommodation. And if there is an accommodation that it can be given to an employee based upon a religious objection, in this case, objection to vaccination, then the employer must provide that accommodation unless it presents an undue hardship. But there is no undue hardship here. These medical professionals worked throughout the pandemic and were hailed as heroes of the front lines while observing the usual precautions with a viral outbreak: masking, gloves, perhaps goggles and face shields in certain circumstances. And no one ever suggested that they posed an undue hardship to the employers. On the contrary, they were the heroes. But as they themselves have said in demonstrations about these vaccine mandates, yesterday's heroes are today's zeros. Well, the federal judge said that isn't right under Title VII. The state of New York has no right to foreclose attempts to reach accommodations with employers over the vaccine mandate based on religious objections. And since the temporary restraining order was issued, which was followed by a preliminary injunction, all but 2 of the plaintiffs in this action have either been granted exemptions or kept employed while awaiting the final outcome of the litigation. And so the result has been tremendously beneficial to these plaintiffs. And also statewide, I've been approached by people at other institutions, medical facilities, who have been granted exemptions based upon the religious objections to vaccination because of the preliminary injunction. Now, yesterday, on appeal from that preliminary injunction, I argued this case before a 3-judge panel. And we're awaiting for the outcome of that decision on the Title VII issue, and also on the related issue of free exercise of religion. And there the law is quite simple, by the way. If any secular activity is treated more favorably than religious activity under a COVID-19 restriction, then the state has to show a compelling state interest for the assertion of that regulation over religious activity. There is no such compelling state interest here, as demonstrated by the fact that the medical exemptions are granted under the vaccination mandate. The medical exemptions threaten the same supposed compelling state interest as the religious exemptions. In other words, the medically exempt people can wear personal protective equipment, work in the hospital environment, and they pose exactly the same risk of viral spread as those seeking religious exemptions. So these two issues were argued yesterday before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. That decision will determine whether this injunction continues to operate. And if the injunction is for any reason overturned, our recourse will be either to a full panel of the Second Circuit in what is called en banc review, or a direct appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And in that connection, we're awaiting the outcome of a parallel case arising in the state of Maine, which came from the First Circuit Court of Appeals. There is an application before the Supreme Court now for emergency injunctive relief on an appeal in that case to the Supreme Court. The outcome in that case may well have impact in this case. In any event, if our injunction is overturned, we will be seeking recourse either before the en banc panel or the United States Supreme Court. And again, this is a statewide injunction with profound implications for the entire healthcare industry.
Mm. You know, I remember I was talking on a phone call with Andy Bath, I think it was last week, and he was talking about all these battles that you're fighting on the front lines, Chris, and what's going on in New York. And for anybody who lives in New York, or if you've been to New York, or if you've ever seen a New York license plate, you know it's called the Empire State. And Andy was saying it's the Empire State Strikes Back. But the good news is that I don't know whether you're Yoda in this story or you're Luke Skywalker, but we know who wins ultimately in that battle of good versus evil there. And Karen in New York City, one of our viewers, is asking, how long can they continue to justify depriving people the right to live a normal life in New York?
That is a wonderfully appropriate question, because what is going on here in its broadest sense is nothing less than an attempt to rewrite the social contract. This is profound. What they are saying now is that your ability to participate in society, to pursue your livelihood, to enter a restaurant, even ultimately, as we see in some European places, to purchase groceries, the necessities of life, will depend upon vaccination. But in this particular case, under the vaccine mandate we are challenging, the vaccination must be continuous. What is continuous vaccination? Well, the rule ominously declares that continuous vaccination is defined in accordance with whatever the government recommends or advises, which means booster shots. Now we're hearing talk of a fourth booster shot. And the evidence is mounting, by the way, that these vaccines do not do what is advertised. We see it in countries such as Israel with a 90% vaccination rate, Ireland with a 91% vaccination rate. Hospitalizations are soaring, outbreaks are soaring among the vaccinated. And now the CDC says that even the vaccinated must wear masks to protect the unvaccinated from themselves, meaning that the transmission of the virus is not being inhibited by vaccination. So at the same time, we see evidence that these vaccines are failing and do not accomplish their purpose. We are also seeing what promises to be, as the questioner suggests, either a semi-permanent or even a permanent medical dictatorship in which your participation in social, economic, and even spiritual life will depend upon continuous vaccination. This is absolutely unprecedented in the history of this country. You should be terrified if you care at all about civil liberties.
One last question for you, Chris, before we start to wrap up, and Andy Bath will come back on in a minute to give us kind of a wrap up. Another question that came in from Marietta. She says, okay, what about the person who was coerced to get vaccinated against their conscience, and now they're saying, hey, I don't want a booster shot? What do we do for somebody like that?
Well, if you are the subject of coercion by an employer, you take the first shot despite your religious objection, and you've already expressed a religious objection to the employer, then you would have recourse, even though you consented to be injected with the vaccine, to a complaint for religious discrimination, depending upon what state you're in. I'm licensed in New York, New Jersey, and South Carolina. I can't give advice to people in other states, but I can say in more general terms that you have options which consist of either a pursuit of a Title VII remedy, which begins with an EEOC complaint. You'll have an EEOC office nearby. And in some states, you have human rights laws, which may or may not involve an administrative proceeding. Some of the human rights laws allow you to go directly to court. You can sue immediately. So if you have reconsidered your consent, so-called, to vaccination under coercion, you have the option of presenting a demand or a request for religious accommodation to your employer, explaining the circumstances under which you were coerced. And that coercion, by the way, is itself an adverse employment action, which can be cited as an instance of religious discrimination. So pursue the two paths of remedy. If you have both of them in your state, the EEOC complaint, and then at some point they will either adjudicate it and take the case themselves, or give you a 90-day right to sue letter, and then you can sue in state or federal court, or also a local human rights law, which may or may not require an administrative proceeding before you can sue. But don't take it lying down. The fact that you gave in the first time doesn't mean your case is over, especially if you've made a record of your objection to the initial vaccination.
Chris, thank you for fighting the good fight against the Empire State. Thank you for all you do to advance the causes that we hold dear. And just know how much I appreciate you and all the Thomas More Society attorneys. And thank you for sharing these battles with us tonight so we can pray and we can participate in helping to make sure that we win victories on these important cases.
I'd ask everybody watching this to pray for a good outcome in the Second Circuit, which is deliberating this case right now, as to whether that injunction, a statewide injunction benefiting these healthcare workers who were yesterday's heroes, that the injunction will stand, or ultimately that we will prevail in either the en banc forum or in the United States Supreme Court.
Okay, so I can't get everybody else to raise their hand because I can't see them, but you got my commitment. I will be praying that this will prevail in the Second Circuit. And Chris, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you for your legal fight. You really inspire the heck out of me. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. God bless.
All right. Okay, so we are just about done here. We're going to bring Andy Bath back in just a moment to wrap up, but I wanted to just share, I've got notices that already in the first few minutes after we shared, there was this $250,000 matching challenge tonight and through Monday, November the 15th. In the first few minutes, more than $10,000 in donations poured in right away, and they're still coming in. So I'm sorry if I don't get caught up, but thanks to Joe and Barb for $1,000, Jennifer for $250, Christopher for $1,000, Christina for $50, Richard for $20, Mary for your recurring gift, Richards for your recurring gift. And the list goes on, and I'm sorry, I just can't keep up with it this fast while also trying to manage the event. But for those who have not yet, this is your chance. If you want to make sure that together we're protecting religious liberty as well as advancing the sanctity of life and advancing marriage and family on the legal battlefronts all across our nation, these are the defining battles. This is the moment we are called for such a time as this. Then I'm going to encourage you, I'm going to challenge you to invest in the work of Thomas More Society. Click the donate once button or the give monthly button. Your gift will be matched dollar for dollar up to $250,000 tonight and through Monday, November the 15th, or you can go to thomasmoresociety.org, click the donate button. And again, a reminder for those who want legal advice yourself. We had so many questions. We've tried to answer a lot of them. If you didn't get your question answered, scroll down to the bottom of this page. If you're watching us live, if you're watching the replay, and there's a button down there you can click to get vaccine mandate legal advice from Thomas More Society, learn how to write a religious exemption letter, and so much more. So scroll down and get that as well. And with that, I'm going to bring back on to close us out my dear friend and longtime colleague in all of these important battles, Andy Bath. And Andy, I was just thinking as we were going through this event, when we were together just a couple of months ago in Omaha, Nebraska, Nebraska for a gathering for the Thomas More Society, and you got up and you fired up that crowd. And I have never seen not only you that fired up, but those people were so ready, realizing we're at a crucial moment, a crucial cultural moment, and all of us have a role in responding to it. So I just want to thank you for your leadership, and I want to give you the floor to share with us any closing comments, any thanks to those who are generously giving, or anything else that's on your heart tonight to finish out our time together.
Well, David, I'm going to end with a call to action here. Folks, we've been inundated with calls, with emails, and with intakes on our website from people who are being subjected to these awful COVID vaccine mandates. We're actually getting hundreds of calls and intakes every day. And it's one of the reasons we're reaching out to you with this webcast. It's also the reason we put the page that I referred to on our website. So please help us get the word out. We want people who have sincere religious objections to these mandates to know that they can request a religious accommodation and to do so, and then to take the action if their request is unreasonably denied, or if they're fired, or if they're furloughed or suspended. So please go to our website. The button will be staring you in the face when you get to the homepage of our website, thomasmoresociety.org. More has one O. And then I have taken that link and sent it and emailed it and texted it to innumerable people who have reached out to me. Please take the link to that website, send it out to your friends and relatives, help us get the word out so that these good people know what rights they have. We want to get that word out. On that page, we've got sample letters for Catholics, for non-Catholic Christians. We got a sample letter requesting an accommodation for members of the military. If you've been fired, if you've been discriminated against, if you've been retaliated against because you exercise some of your rights, we have instructions there that will help you go to the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, which is the division of the Department of Labor that's tasked by Congress with administering complaints of religious discrimination. We will lead you through that process. Please go to our website. And keep in mind that many employers are granting religious accommodations. It is not all doom and gloom. This is not hopeless. You should go there and exercise your rights. And these are really important rights. The First Amendment right to the free exercise of our religion is vital. It must be defended. It's in the First Amendment, in the first place in the First Amendment, because our framers thought it was the most important of all the rights they were protecting with our Constitution. Then we need your support so that we can rally in support of all these people who are contacting us. And lifted by support from people like you, our viewers here tonight, we, the Thomas More Society, are taking decisive action in courts spread all across the country. We're in courts literally from coast to coast, and we're doing these legal actions all at the same time, I might add, to preserve and protect the constitutional rights of religious believers everywhere. Now, we have been called to step up in a big way right now, and we are meeting the challenge. We have to have the staying power to take these cases all the way through the various courts of appeal up to the Supreme Court, where we expect to ultimately get victory for our clients. We know we can only do this because we have you standing by us. You make it possible for us to answer the call at critical moments like these. And we know that we couldn't do that if you weren't willing to sacrifice for the cause. And I just want you to know that we are grateful. Thank you for your support.
Andy Bath, thank you so very much. Quick question for you. Do you know roughly how many cases the Thomas More Society is fighting right now all across America? I've lost count.
Well, it depends on what you mean by a case, Dave. I'm going to go all lawyer on you and say it depends on what you mean. We have helped innumerable people make requests for religious accommodations from their employer. We're also being asked to help with health-related requests for accommodations, but that's outside of our mission. We are all behind those people, but we are a religious liberties law firm, a pro-life law firm, and we're going to help pro-life religious believers request and get religious accommodations where they can't, where they've been fired. We are constrained by federal law to start the process of contesting that action in many cases by filing an administrative complaint with the EEOC. And that is a non-public process, and we have filed a lot of those. And then once we're clear of that, Sometimes we're clear of it to begin with. Other times we have to wait until we exhaust our administrative remedies under the federal law. Then we can file lawsuits, and we've probably filed maybe a dozen lawsuits so far. So we would have administrative hurdles that we have to get over before we can file lawsuits in most cases.
Right. And I was just thinking about, when I've talked to Tom Breck about this, and he shared with me all the other cases beyond vaccine mandates and everything else. And then when you think about what Steve Crampton was talking about, where each of these is a person with a story, what I really want to underscore for the person watching us right now is there are lots of real lives that are really being affected, and Thomas More Society is fighting on behalf of those who may not have a voice without them, and without you and me to stand alongside the Thomas More Society. And so my encouragement to everybody right now, we've heard numerous opportunities to pray, and I would invite you to pray fervently for the attorneys, to pray for the cases, to pray for all of the legal help that is being provided to those who are being discriminated against, and all of the other fronts. David Daleiden's case on the pro-life front, and other pro-life free speech fronts, and marriage and family, and all the other things, Thomas More Society. Can we commit to lift up these attorneys and Thomas More Society in prayer? And then the second thing I'm going to ask each and every person to do, if you haven't already, is please, if you are able, give. No amount is too small. Really, whatever you can do. There were different times where my gifts to Thomas More Society were very, very small, but it gave what I could, and it made a difference, and it multiplies to all the other people that they are helping, and organizations and causes. That $250,000 matching challenge, that's amazing. And that opportunity to have not only your money doubled, which we're not going to do in the stock market right now, but to double the impact of these important culture shaping cases and efforts that are happening through this important work. Please, if you're able, click the donate once, give monthly over the next 2 weeks as you have the opportunity before that deadline to please give to the Thomas More Society. And then the last thing I'm going to ask everybody, and Andy, I know you do this because you spread the word to people you know. I spread the word is I've had friends, a head of pharmacy in a hospital. I had a doctor friend. I have friends in the Marine Corps. I live not far from Quantico Marine Base, friends who are civilian contractors to government. And they're all coming to me and saying, oh my gosh, what do I do about this? And I have this resource, the Thomas More Society, to say, here's someone who can help you. They can give you legal guidance. They can give you legal help. And so for all of us to share this recording of this webcast so people know what the challenges are and how they can be a part of solving them, and this resource that can help their friends. Please spread the word. As soon as we're done with this event, this will become a replay. You can share this video with your friends or just send them to thomasmoresociety.org so they can get involved in this important work. So I just want to finally say thank you. Thank you, Andy Bath. I love you, brother, and appreciate you so much. You are such a heroic leader. I appreciate your work as the Executive Vice President and General Counsel. Thank you to Paul Jonah, who we heard from, and Peter Breen, Steve Crampton, Chris Ferreira, and also thanks, though he wasn't on this event live, our dear friend Tom Breck and his wife Debbie. And I also want to thank Karen, who is behind the scenes helping to pull so much of this event together. Literally, this all came together just in the last few days, and more than 2,400 people are a part of it, thanks in large part to some of Karen's work. And then most importantly, I want to thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight, for carving the time out, for watching the broadcast, for getting engaged, for submitting your questions, for giving and for spreading the word, for watching the replay. Thank you. You really are making a freedom-advancing, life-saving, kingdom-building difference through your participation in the work of the Thomas More Society. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you, Andy. God bless you all, and good night.
Thank you all.